Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 30 of the Memorial Memo KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast. Katie, we're finally getting some news as the summer starts to head along. Got some scheduling info, some recruiting updates. We have our Mount Rushmores of Kentucky women's basketball because that's the kind of thing you do in the summertime. But Katie, before we get into all that, just how are you?
Pretty good. I mean, the summer's been good so far, just on the job hunt, as I'm sure you understand. But other than that, I can't complain.
Yeah, that's always, as I imagine right now, thankfully I'm not in a position where I'm actively looking for a job, but like I know the job market is like not the greatest, especially in what we do. It's just, like you just never know. Like it's almost one of those things where it's almost like maybe something will pop up, but I guess you really just never know. But Katie, the main thing we need to talk about today is the non-conference schedule is really starting to come together, right? Caroline Makauskas of the Lexington Herald Leader, she did an open records request. UK has officially announced some games, like they officially announced November 9th at Buffalo this morning. But between that open records request and some official announcements, we kind of, not all the way, but we have a pretty good picture of what Kentucky's non-conference schedule looks like. Stephen, go ahead, throw the graphic on the screen, and I'll go ahead and just kind of read along through some of the games. So the season opener, Katie, we got Morehead State at home. Now, they're coached by Ashton Feldhouse, who, of course, if you're in the UK circle, you know that last name because her uncle Darren played for UK. The next game will be Monmouth at home, and then the first road game of the season, which honestly, Katie, I feel like is the most intriguing, so far intriguing game of the non-conference is at Buffalo. That's the Claire Streck homecoming game. She's from that area, so that'll be an interesting one. And then, Katie, we have December 7th versus Central Michigan. Complete the home and home series against Belmont in Nashville against them. December 19th against Wright State. And then some other non-conference games that we know, just not the exact date of yet. Kentucky will be playing at Louisville. They'll take on Purdue at home. And then there's the SEC ACC Challenge. So, Katie, I just wanted to get your kind of thoughts and takeaways from the non-conference schedule because to me, I'm almost like disappointed. Now, to be fair, this is not a complete non-conference schedule, right? Like you look at there's probably 3 or 4 games you could throw in there, maybe a multi-team event, maybe some marquee opponents, you don't know. But Katie, just wanted to get your thoughts real quick on the non-conference schedule.
I will say, I think, like you, I mean, it's not exactly exciting, but I do think that it's a little bit better than what we saw last year, which, of course, last year, I think Kenny Brooks talked about this a few times, having difficulty scheduling games just because it's a new coach, a new year. It's kind of difficult to kind of get into that groove of things, I guess you could say. So I'm just happy we can watch a season without having to watch Kentucky play USC Upstate. Like I feel like that's one of those games that just happens every year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is exciting. I think that, like you said, the Buffalo game is going to be really cool to watch because that's Clara Strack's hometown. I can't help but think that that game was scheduled just because, give Clara the opportunity to go to her hometown. I don't know if that's exactly how that worked for them, but I think that that's exciting. And then, of course, Morehead State is an in-state game, so those are always fun to watch. And then Louisville, obviously, it's a rivalry game, so that one's going to be a fun game. And I'm hoping this season that the SEC ACC Challenge is a more interesting matchup than what we've seen in the past. A couple years ago, it was Boston College.
Yeah.
That was not a fun game. Last year, it was UNC away, so that was also not a fun game. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't think that it's like anything crazy. It's definitely not super difficult, but
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the point of non-conference is to just get back into the groove before conference play. Obviously, that is what non-conference is.
Yeah, I'm kind of like you. Like, I don't love it. Like, I do want to see Kentucky, because when you think about some of these marquee teams, they play not like brutal non-conference schedules, but they play tougher non-conference schedules, right? And it's just again, this isn't complete. Like for all we know, Kentucky could be in the Bahamas playing against, I don't know, UConn or Ole Miss, or not Ole Miss. They're in the SEC. But you get my point. Like UConn, I mean, name a team, UCLA. Like right, you don't know. Like they could end up playing against whoever in whatever event. This isn't like again, it's not set in. Well, these games are pretty much set in stone, but like the schedule's not done, and it's just I don't know. I want to see some marquee matchups, but we're not quite there yet. Like Purdue at home, that's like that. Like Purdue's not great. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Belmont on the road is honestly one. I mean, other than like Louisville, probably the toughest game on there. I
Mhm.
mean, Belmont, they almost beat Kentucky at home, and I get to go down there and play them. Like that'll be a really interesting game. But I'm kind of like you. Like I guess I don't hate it because I'd rather lose in the SEC. I'd rather lose against, the top 25 teams in the country. So I guess, all right. But it's just, I don't know. I feel underwhelmed, but I'm not going to like be too mad about it yet because there could always be some other games pop up. And plus, again, the SEC, it's full of those, marquee games.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like you said, we don't know. Kentucky could end up in the Bahamas or wherever, the Virgin Islands this year, who knows? And get to play some really good teams. So hopefully that happens. Hopefully we figure that out. But of course, that's not gonna, I feel like you said, it's kind of underwhelming, but I'm okay with it because I'd rather lose in the conference.
There's a month-long gap in those games from November 9th at Buffalo to December 7th versus Central Michigan. Like you could definitely squeeze in something there for sure. Katie, ESPN did their recruiting rankings update, and to me, it's interesting because there's only two Kentucky targets that are not ranked, and that's because they're not eligible to be ranked. Jaden McClain in the 2029 class, she goes to Ryle. She there are no rankings for 2029 kids yet, right? And then Isabella Marion, who is from Denmark, they don't rank international kids. So you take out those two. Katie, every single Kentucky target is a top 50 prospect. Kyra Elsie, I don't how many top 50 kids does she even get to come here, right? And I mean, obviously it's different because Kenny, you have to actually get those kids to come here. But Katie, I mean, it's pretty clear. Like Kentucky's going for the best of the best, and that's the standard is the standard. To sound like Mike Tomlin, like that's what Kentucky is. This isn't the Kentucky of old. Like they're going after the best recruits in the country, and there's you can't really deny that.
Yeah, and I mean, just looking through this list of targets that you put together, it's really impressive to see the amount of versatility that is being targeted. I know that that's kind of his job, but it's great to see that even though right now there's Clara Strack and then Elsa Vadvers, which signed or committed a couple of weeks ago, you still are targeting centers and you're still
Yeah.
targeting bigs, even though you don't necessarily need that. It's like, well, maybe one of them, God forbid, transfers out. Like, who knows what's going to happen? So, just staying in and making sure that you're still targeting every single position, regardless of, who you need or what you don't. I think is a great sign. And also, like you said, he's targeting the best of the best. And I think that that is a great sign to see exactly where Kenny wants to take the program, especially after such a great first season. And after losing Georgia Amore, it's like now he really has to prove himself with players who aren't necessarily like all American stars. But, who knows who's going to come to Kentucky in the next few years? Who knows who he's going to bring in and develop? So it's going to be really exciting.
And I'm glad you brought up development because you think about someone like Clara Strack. Katie, she was like I think she was ranked 95th in her class, like a
Mm-hmm.
borderline top 100 kid. Katie, you bring in someone like Madden Greenway, who, by the way, according to ESPN, went from number 10 to number 11. Whatever. On three, Talia actually she released her update this morning. Uh, kind of similar to how Madden did with ESPN was like number like 17, 18. She's up to number 10 in our rankings. So, on three rankings, of course, they're going to be better because that's just how we roll. But Katie, like imagine Madden Greenway coming in, like a top 10 kid, and you know how great of a developer Kenny is. You know how great of a point guard developer Kenny is specifically. Like Madden Green, like, dude, is she gonna be like a number one overall pick down the line? And then you look at some of these names that Kentucky's recruiting, or specifically, you look at where they're ranked, and it's like, Kenny, I mean, he could bring in a top 25 prospect and develop them too. Like, my gosh, like, it has you really excited. Now, obviously, you have to close the deal, right? Like, it's cool to recruit these kids, but you also have to land them, right? Now,
Mhm.
I know, excuse me, I know it kind of ended up working out, but you did only land one kid in the 2025 class. Now, to be fair, she's a top 15 recruit, but still, you get my point. Like, you have to go and get these kids. But Katie, regardless, it's still super exciting just to see the kind of position that Kentucky and their targets are in right now.
Yeah, it's super exciting, and I think that fans should start getting really excited about Kenny if they're not already, because he's clearly wanting to make a difference here after the 4-year train wreck that fans had previously seen. But yeah, I mean, hopefully a lot of these players end up in the W, and maybe, we'll see some players go maybe on the Olympic team. Who knows if he's
Yeah.
recruiting these top 50 players, they probably have extremely bright futures ahead of them.
Yeah, and it's super exciting because Kenny was in early on a lot of these kids. Like I think of Ivana Wilson Maniaka, like the top, well, number 2 prospect in the 27 class. I think she was like one of the first kids Kenny offered when he got here, right? Like you look at some of these names like Sydney Douglas, number 2 in 2028. I mean, all these names he's been in. Chloe Johnson, point guard in 28, who I actually would feel really good about Kentucky getting. Super early for me to say that, I know, but it just feels like there's a lot of like she seems like she's visited Kentucky a lot. There seems to be some good momentum there. Point guard, of course, so that's always good. She plays in Minnesota. Like she's played against Madden Greenway a ton, so there's that connection too. But you just look. I mean, I just look across these names like Mimi Thero, bring a dude's little sister here, or not so little. You know what I mean? Like you bring in these names. And it's just exciting to see. Like you just look at these names, you look at where they're ranked, and you can't help but think, man, maybe that Final Four that that long eluded Final Four, we can finally reach and go get. Katie, now I hinted at it earlier, but we're gonna do our Mount Rushmore of Kentucky women's basketball. Right now, the reason I bring this up and the reason we're doing this at all, well, number one, it's the summertime. We need something to talk about, right? But number 2, I was on Twitter, and I haven't been online a ton recently, but I was on Twitter, and I just see it's this Mount Rushmore of women's sports in general, right? And you have like Billie Jean King, Simone Biles, all these names, and I was like, that would be fun to do, but I was like, this is a Kentucky women's basketball show, not necessarily a women's sports as a whole show. So I was like, oh, let's just narrow it down to Kentucky women's basketball, right? So, Katie, I wanted to start by noting in our criteria for this, I guess. I think the only real one is like you can do players and coaches. You can do, it isn't just players, it isn't just coaches. You can do a mix of both, right? So, I guess Katie, we can start with you. Uh, Mount Rushmore of Kentucky women's basketball. Obviously, it's so hard because it's like 4 names. You have to narrow it down to 4. Katie, I'm just curious, who in the world did you pick for this exercise?
Yeah, I mean, before I get into it, I also feel like I don't know if my dad's watching, but he mentioned this to me a few weeks ago. I don't know if you remember, I told you about this. Like, my dad wants us to do a Mount Rushmore of Kentucky women's basketball. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. But, like, I don't know if we really have, like, the time or whatever. But, of course, here we are doing Mount Rushmore. So he'll be happy to see that. But, yeah, our Mount Rushmores are actually very similar. And I made these silly little graphics to show faces so y'all watching out there can see who we're talking about.
Oh, I can't wait for this.
I'm gonna start with Matthew Mitchell. I feel like that's probably the most obvious of the 4. As you can see, he's the second one on there.
Okay.
I don't know who the president behind there is. Maybe George Washington. Who knows? I don't even know who's on Mount Rushmore. But yeah, that's my Matthew Mitchell. 69.2% win rate. He's overall 281 and 125. led Kentucky to 3 Elite Eights over 13 seasons, 5 Sweet 16s, 9 second round appearances. They finished first in the SEC in the 2011-2012 season, going undefeated at home. And he coached names like Victoria Dunlap, Adia Matthews, Ryan Howard. And his career actually started as a graduate assistant under Pat Summitt. So that's just a pretty cool blurb of information. He also coached at Morehead State for a couple of years. Then we have obviously another kind of gimme is Ryan Howard. She currently is, I believe, third in career points for Kentucky, maybe fourth if you're including Georgia Amore. I can't remember the exact numbers. But she scored 30 plus points in 10 games, 25 plus in 33 games, 20 plus points in 61 games. And she leads Kentucky in career threes with 284 total over her 4 seasons here. She's a 2-time All-American, 2-time SEC Player of the Year, and she's one of 3 players to score 2,000 points in less than 100 games. One of those players is Dan Issel on the men's side, and then the next person I want to talk about is Valerie Still. And you would not believe how hard it is to find pictures of Valerie Still playing at Kentucky. It's actually so difficult, but I found this one. Of course, she played back in the 70s, so or early 80s. She is the leading career scorer at Kentucky, 2,763 points, and averaged 23.2 points per game at the end of her career, as well as 12.8 rebounds per game. I don't really have a ton to say about her other than the fact that I think that she kind of set the standard, like the gold standard for players at Kentucky. She's the one, I feel like, when you think about legendary players, you think about Valerie Still. Of course, her signature all white outfits and her white glasses. And she's just a very cool person, and I've had the pleasure of talking to her a couple of times. So just, like I said, a very cool person, a great player. And then finally, I wanted to talk about Victoria Dunlap, and I feel like she's kind of one of the ones that people tend to look over. She played from 2007 to 2011 and has all kinds of accolades to her name. So she was All-American in 2010, 2-time SEC Player of the Year in 2010, 2011. She was SEC Defensive Player of the Year in 2011 and first team All SEC in 2010 and 2011. And she is currently 4th in all-time points scored with 1,846. But if you're including Georgia Amore in this, it's 5th. I'm only saying if because Georgia only played 1 year at Kentucky, so it's kind of, I feel like, a fine line to include those people. But yeah, I think this is my Mount Rushmore. Very impressive people who made an impact on the team and kind of changed the game at Kentucky.
You know, it's very hard to argue against any of those. Great explanations. I definitely do not have as much info ready to say, even though I think you covered a lot of my bases there. But I can't really argue against any of those. I mean, obviously, I have 3 of them, to be fair. One of them who I swap out, which you'll see in a second. But I really like Victoria Dunlap. It's again, I don't have her in mind, but I really like that because you're right. Like, she is very overlooked. Like, her and Adia Matthews, I feel like, just get overlooked so much in terms of like Kentucky women's basketball player, and they shouldn't. And I say they only overlooked because I feel like we say they're overlooked, but they're not, like, in a way. Like, I feel like we may overlook them. I would say people who are older than us, no offense, old people, we love you. Like they probably don't overlook them like we do, but it's like, I don't know. We're a little bit younger. I get, I think about, like, I barely remember the 2012 national championship team, like on the men's side. And
yeah,
that sucks.
I remember watching the game. I honestly, like, at the time could not have told you a single person on the team, probably. But
I knew Anthony Davis for sure because the brow.
Yeah, that's true. And the wingspan. I remember that so vividly.
But I barely remember and that it hurts. Like, you know what really hurts, Katie? I don't remember the John Wall team at all. Like not even not
Gosh.
like I have no recollection, and that sucks because like shout out to our guy Daniel who makes like the YouTube highlights. Like man, like
I
I've
just
had to
remember
go
the
back and
song,
yeah, I've
the
had to
John
go
Wall
back and
song.
watch those and be like, oh, that's what I missed out on. Like, you know how cool it'd have been to see the '96 championship or like any of
Mhm.
those, but no, I barely remember the like literally I actually barely. I mean, I remember the 2014 team that went to the title game, but like I just remember being so mad after they lost that game. Like, hey, like why would you even go that far if you're gonna lose? But that was yeah. We're young. We're a little bit young to say the least. But Katie, I want to talk about my Mount Rushmore a little bit too because it's basically the exact same as yours, but instead of Victoria Dunlap, I have Kenny Brooks. Right now, I think there's a very fair argument to make that why in the world do you have Kenny Brooks there if he's only coached 1 year? And to be fair, it was a good year, but they lost in the second round of the NCAA tournament. They didn't win a game in the SEC tournament. Like, what are you doing, Phoenix? You get your recency bias out of here. Like, what's wrong with you? And I think those are all fair things to say. But for me, it kind of transcends a little bit, like it transcends the on the court stuff a little bit, right? Katie, like this podcast doesn't exist without Kenny Brooks. The hundreds and thousands of hundreds or thousands of people don't watch this podcast or listen to it without Kenny Brooks, right? Like there aren't two of us here talking about this stuff without Kenny Brooks. Like the fan interest in the program does not exist without Kenny Brooks. Like to me, you got to think about no, people have not cared about Kentucky women's basketball more than they do now. Now, a lot of that is actually just like the growth of the game in general, like the Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, and you know all these figures that have helped the sport as a whole explode. But Katie, just as far as the team specifically goes, like there's never been more interest than there is now, and I feel like that's pretty. Like I feel like that's pretty fair to say. I don't know. Maybe some of you all that were alive in 1982 can tell me that whenever they won the SEC title, maybe everything was you know more in you know what I mean. Like I think it's fair. Like to me, obviously, I think it's fair to put Kenny Brooks on here. Number one, I kind of wanted to have a balance of coaches and players on my Mount Rushmore, but two, I just feel like the stuff that he's done in his time here, which, on the court, it was a good year. But Katie, I feel like just in terms of fan excitement, momentum for the program, kind of the trajectory of things, I feel like it's safe to go ahead and put him on there. But Katie, I wanted to get your opinion on that because obviously, Victoria Dunlap definitely deserving to be on there. Audia Matthews, Michaela Epps. There's a lot of names I could have put up there, but I put Kenny Brooks, and I just wanted to hear what you had to say about that.
I mean, that was kind of tough for me. And honestly, the only reason, and well, maybe not the only reason, but one of the main reasons I didn't put him up there was because I was working on mine when you sent me yours so I could make these like stupid graphics. And I was like, man, ours would literally be the exact same. So I
Yeah.
need to make a change here. But I couldn't fathom taking out Ryan Howard or Matthew Mitchell or Valerie Still. So I
Yeah.
was like, who can I replace here? And the only person was Kenny Brooks. And the reason behind that is, like you said, because he's only coached for 1 year. I think that
Yeah.
eventually he will solidify his spot up here. Like it will happen, especially if he's as successful as we think he is. But yeah, I mean, really, that's the only reason is the time span. But I do agree with you.
Yeah, and I definitely I can't be mad at anyone that wants to argue against that. That's just personally how I feel. But but Katie, I think we're gonna go ahead and pretty much call it a wrap on this episode. It was a fun exercise. That was really fun to do.
Mhm.
Uh, but I feels like you can't argue against Matthew Mitchell. Like he's the winningest coach. You can't argue against Valerie Still. She's the best player in the history of the program. Ron Howard, second best, maybe etching her way to the best, right? Like, there's a lot of names. Like, I even thought about Georgia Amore, but for me, it was like,
Mhm.
well, she's only here for 1 year. At least Kenny will be here for more than 1 year. Like, And there's definitely some names down the line that could end up on that list. Those top 50 recruits, maybe some of them end up on the Mount Rushmore one day. But Katie, like I said, we're going to call it an episode. Do you have any final words before we get out of here?
No, I don't. I don't think so. That was super fun to think about. And if I could have made a double Mount Rushmore, I definitely could have found 4 more people deserving to be up there. But
Oh yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
I mean, it was a tough decision, but I think that we both kind of hit it on the nail. Hit the head of the nail.
Hit the head on the. I don't know.
Hit the nail on the
Hit the nail on
head.
the head. There you
That's
go.
what it
We
is.
figured it out. There we go. All right, so we're going to continue to learn how to say old people sayings correctly. A lot of old people are getting good flack in this episode.
Wow.
I love you guys. Like like I don't know. I don't know why I'm calling out old people like I am. Old people, you're great. Old, young, whatever. We will see you guys on the next episode of the Memorial Memo. We'll see you later.